And then 3, 2, 1, we're going live. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Shure.com's live stream. We have a really exciting one for you today. I'm Laura Davidson. I work with Shure. Mario Ponce is joining me. He also works for Shure, and so does the incredible guest that we have brought with us today, Michael Pettersen, who is our company historian. That's right. Shure has a company historian because we've been around for almost 100 years, and we've got a lot of history, and this gem that we're going to talk about today is a big part of that history. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Mario. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, welcome. One thing, too, that I always like to bring to everyone's attention is that we actually have an entire archive section at our HQ. And we do tours for folks. And every tour that I'm on, people are just blown away by all the great stuff that you share, Michael, and the rich history that we have at Shure. So it's quite a thing, the archive. I was taken by surprise the first time that I went through it with all the great, crazy stuff. Pleasantly surprised. So yeah, every time I tell that to people, they're like, wow, that's so great. And it is. So
yes.
I've had 6 jobs and Shure, this is the best one.
Yeah, can you give us a history of your history? Tell us when you joined. Tell us all of those gigs that you had before you ended up as our historian. And I apologize, I'm going to be pixelated. We tried to resolve it, so if anyone says you're pixelated, I know, sadly. All right, tell us, Michael.
I joined in October 1976. I literally walked into their East Arch department, not even looking for a job, just kind of saying, I want to know more about your company. I was a Shure user. And was there and convinced them that they needed to hire me, and it worked out. So I started out in sales for about 5 years, regional sales manager. I wasn't very good at it. I was so much into the product, that the aspects of how much money and what's the profit and so forth, that was important to dealers, but I could have cared less. So I wasn't really cut out for that. Early 80s, I became a product manager. I was a product manager for our mixer products, some of our early conferencing products, for our FP products, our field production products. Did that for about 10 years. For a short period of time, I did what's called advanced product planning, that was looking at new technologies that was going to influence us down the road. Early 90s, I came up with the idea of creating our application engineering department. We didn't have that at the time. If you called in to Shure and you said, hey, I'm trying to mic a bagpipe, what do I use? There was nobody to send you to. You might go to customer service. There was no central point. So I said, we need a department that basically helps people choose and use the proper products. So started out with 3 of us, and now, what are we, 30 application engineers worldwide, I guess?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then around 2015, 2016, I had done it for a long time. Gino was my right-hand man, was ready to take over the department. And if I had stayed there, he would have got frustrated and leave. So it's real important to know when it's time to step aside and let the new people go. So I was going to retire. And my wife had just retired, and she heard that. She said, oh, no, I don't want you at home all day. And so,
no thanks.
No thanks. So Chris Shavink had just taken over as our 4th president, and she, of course, knew all the work I'd done in history with our 400-page history book with Mrs. Shure, and I knew Mr. Shure and Mrs. Shure very well. And she said, why don't you become our historian and do podcasts and streaming and write stories and so forth? I was like, great, love it. So that's what I do now, and no intention of retiring, because interestingly, the older you get, the more valuable you become as a historian. So
that's right.
So that's the short version.
Nice.
That's a great version, though. We're so lucky to have you. I
Right.
lean on your expertise all the time, and there's this really
Thank you.
cool internal newsletter that Michael puts out for
Yeah.
us every week with all these tech tips and all of these like just little gems of knowledge that you would never connect the dots on. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So you are the right person to have on today's stream, right,
Right.
Thank
Mario?
you. Thank
Yes,
you.
and he comes with a wealth of knowledge of things that, in putting this live stream together, I learned so much. So super looking forward to everyone else learning about all these little facts that you probably don't even know about this microphone. So, and we are celebrating its 50th anniversary, so we're excited about
Yep.
that. We have got a lot of really cool things that are happening in terms of that, and we'll share that here in a little bit. But we do have an online magazine that we call Louder, and you can see it through the Shure.com portal. But Michael, you wrote an article for Louder regarding the SM7B. I think we have a picture of it, or just to share it here. So
Yeah. That's the
this,
first that's the first flyer. We've only ever had one flyer. In 50 years, we've only had one
Really?
flyer for it. Yes.
this
Wow.
is it right
And,
here.
and that's the first flyer.
Wow.
And we've never done another one.
We didn't really need to, I
I
guess.
guess not. Yeah, I guess not.
Wow. Yeah. So this goes through the entire history of the SM7B or the SM7. And what I find most interesting is its origins. So maybe that's a good place to start, is sort of the origin, because I know there's kind of a larger story regarding the SM microphone category or line of mics. So maybe that's a good place to start with.
So you want me to talk a little bit about how the SM line got started?
Yeah, let's, because I thought that was super interesting. It was something that I learned when I was
And
putting this together.
before we jump into that, we did have Bandrew Scott, who I'm so psyched that's on the stream with us right now, ask about the 400-page history book, Michael.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Um,
is that
so
available or is it out of print?
it's you can find it on eBay on a regular basis. And it's a 2-volume, 400-page book. They go for about $30 to $60 on eBay. We printed up 5,000 of them in the year 2000, and everybody who was working at Shure at the time got a copy. And then at your first anniversary, you got a copy. But then we ran out of them, so there are no more. There are no more available, but you can find them out there. There's a lot of libraries that have them as well. We sent out some to libraries. It started out where 1995 I wrote a memo to Mrs. Shure. Let's do a 20-page pamphlet about the history of the company. Well, 380 pages later. But
That'll
she and I
teach you
did.
to write a memo.
She and I did that book. But the good thing that came out of the book was also got us to organize the archive. I mean, we had a collection of stuff, but then when we started writing the book, we realized it had to be organized, and that's when we created the archive from that. So yes, you can find it on eBay. It's called. Hey, let me just look here. Sound, People, Products, and Values. So if you put in Shure,
There we go.
Sound, People, Products, and Values, it'll come up. And again, 30 to $60. They're up there almost every day. So SM.
SM.
Yeah, early 1960s, there's a guy working here at Shure named Bob Carr. And Bob Carr was given this assignment. You know, Shure microphones are not really popular in studios. And that meant TV studios, radio studios, and recording studios. Bob, we want you to go out and get our microphones in the recording studios, in the studios. But we're not going to give you a budget. So Bob Carr was really kind of hamstrung about this. And so what he did was he went and started talking to studios, and he found out, why aren't you using Shure microphones? Well, besides the fact that RCA and AKG and Neumann were already entrenched, but they said, well, you use those Amphenol connectors. You got to use XLR connectors, and you've got switches on your mics. We don't want on-off switches on our mics. And on TV, you got chrome handles. We don't want chrome handles that reflects light. So he came back with this whole list of stuff, and he realized that he could take Shure microphones that already existed and just kind of redo them, get rid of the switch, put an XLR connector on them, paint them gray, and so forth, and they would probably be okay. So he called them the SM mic, studio microphones. That was what it meant. And in 1964, we brought out our first line of studio microphones. Most of them were simply nothing but repackaged, repainted standard lines, except for one, and that was the SM7B, which was a big microphone that we wanted to use for overhead boom mic in film studios. Now, overhead boom microphones have pretty much always been condensers. Originally, they were ribbons, and they moved to condensers. But we didn't have a condenser mic, so we decided to take a dynamic microphone and turn it into a boom mic. There's a problem with that. You mic from 3, 4, 5 feet away. Dynamic mics don't have a lot of sensitivity. So it was never really a big success for boom microphones. But some radio stations started using it for a voiceover mic, where sensitivity is not a problem, right? You're right up on top of it, so it's not an issue. And it started to gain popularity as a radio station voiceover microphone. Here you go. Perfect example of that, right? It's got a lighter gray up front and a darker gray in the back. And it sounds good, a lot of low end, got that typical announcer's voice on. The problem was that radio stations, there's only a limited amount of radio stations. And then once they buy the mic, they don't buy any more. So it really was never a big hit for us. It was also expensive. And by the way, I don't know if you can tell the size of it. What the size of a Nerf football, basically.
Yeah, I noticed it was really big.
It is big. And it's mostly foam. And inside that is a Unidyne 3 element. So it's the same element as in the SM58, 57. A few little modifications, but basically it's a Unidyne 3. So, and it was expensive. In today's money, I don't know, maybe $2,000, something like that, I would guess. I haven't done the math on it. So it just kind of limped along. It never really did very well. And then it was the late 60s, and someone said, well, maybe we need a less expensive voiceover microphone. And voiceover, for radio and TV and movies and so forth. Podcasting didn't exist back then. So they started out, okay, well, can we price reduce that SM5, excuse me, and various versions and so forth. And yeah, we did. We came up with the SM7, no A or B. And that came out introduced the end of 1972, first started to sell 1973, spring of 1973. So it was kind of like a smaller, cost-reduced version of the SM5. That's where it started.
Huh. And you mentioned Unidyne 3. Mm-hmm. So when was that? Was that developed around the same time as when the SM line was?
The first Unidyne 3 came out in 1959. That was the model 545, which of course we still make today.
Yeah.
Your listeners are probably most familiar with the SM57 and the SM58. Those are Unidyne 3s, and the 565, which is the Freddie Mercury microphone. So they all have the basic same concept inside of it. They're not all exactly the same, but the same acoustical network is inside of there. And then there's minor variations that you can make to change the response slightly. But Unidyne 3, that's the engine inside the mic. And a lot of our most popular microphones ever are Unidyne 3s and still remain Unidyne 3s.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
Super nerding out on all this stuff. It's so great. I love it.
Yes, nerding out is the best. So one of the things with this particular, all right, so talk about the SM5. When it came out, it had that enormous windscreen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it worked at effectively blocking every single plosive you could ever imagine. And that's great. And I think we had some pushback. We had some pushback from some broadcasters and DJs who said, how dare you get rid of that glorious microphone and that beautiful pop filter? And we brought that pop filter back. You want to talk about that story?
Yeah.
Well, SM5 lasted to about 1988 approximately. And there was an SM5A, an SM5B, an SM5C. They all were different impedances. The C had a little bit of a very steep roll-off filter, so it could be used on booms and wouldn't rumble and so forth. But we never sold many SM5s. It was really pretty much a lame duck because, first of all, there weren't personal studios back then, right? So where did you sell them to? You sold it to radio stations. We already knew it didn't work for a boom mic. He sold them to radio stations, maybe some TV stations used them for voiceovers, maybe some recording studios. But eventually, he just run out of people to sell them to. So we discontinued it in the late 80s. And then at the National Association of Broadcasters show, an annual trade show, every year we would take abuse from the radio station engineer would say, "Oh, you guys are so stupid. Why did you get rid of that SM5? It was the best voiceover microphone ever." And of course, what we wanted to say is, if you guys had bought more, we wouldn't have gotten rid of it. But it was so. It literally went on for probably 15 years of us taking this abuse. And then one day, late, probably around the year 2000 or so, some of us are sitting around lunch, griping about this. and myself or someone, I can't remember who said, he said, "What if we made the SM7 look like the SM5? Maybe people are really people are not in love with the SM5 sound, but in love with the way the SM5 looks." So we said, let's come up with an alternative windscreen. We got that cone-shaped windscreen that comes with the SM7 already. Let's make a bigger, thicker Nerf football one that goes on the SM7. And it'll have some advantages. It's better at reducing close-ups and so forth. But the primary thing is, we could have styled it anyway, but it's styled to look just like the front of the SM5. And we did that. And we did that, and we call it the SM7B. It just happened to be the next letter of Braille, but SM5B, SM7B. Ooh, is that a coincidence? Maybe not. And at the next NAB trade show, people come and say, I said, "Well, what's that?" "Oh, that's a smaller version of the SM5B." "Oh, cool.
I'll take 6.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll
all
take
right.
it.
Excellent. When marketing and design meet, that's a fun collaboration.
And like I said, it's 50 years old. It's doing okay.
Yeah.
It's doing all right. And that's what we're here today talking about. This is the 50th celebration of this microphone, and we have a great website that Mario had put up before that has all kinds of information, which I linked in the video description, so you can take a look at that. And it's also gained a ton of popularity, the microphone, not just for broadcast and for podcasting, but also on stage. People are using it for live applications and in the studio to record vocals or record instruments. We have a great video in our How Do You Do That series that talks about how you can mic an entire drum kit using the SM7B. So, it's a versatile mic.
Yeah. Gloria, can you still hear me? Because my camera froze up.
I think Michael froze up.
Yeah, we could hear you.
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can.
I don't know what to do.
We can hear you. We can't see you.
I don't know what to tell you about the camera thing. Is it, Mario, any suggestions on that? Without logging off here?
That's a good question. I think it just needs to catch up.
Probably hop off and hop back on.
Yeah, if you hop off, we can pipe you back in.
All right, so basically just close out and come back at that same link?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll be back. You can click hang up. Okay. All right.
You have to come back.
I will.
Yeah, please come back.
Promise.
All right. So while we wait for Michael to rejoin, we're doing this anniversary celebration, and there's all that information available on the website. And there's also a limited edition version of the SM7B that we're releasing and giving away to 50 lucky people. And now it's not open worldwide. I did link it in the chat along with the disclaimer. So don't yell at the messenger. But, if you want to enter, that link is down there below. But it's a cool opportunity to win this very, very special mic. It's got our founder's signature on it. It has switchable back plates. It has this cool box that it comes in, and it has a limited edition print that was created that shows the SM7B, kind of how it all came together. And it's a cartoon that's like a little depiction of how it was built. So there's something for everyone in that drawing. And supposedly Michael Pettersen is in that drawing somewhere, although we haven't found him yet. So it's like the Where's Waldo, except it's Where's Michael.
Okay, there we go.
So you can, if you find that image, take a look. And you're back.
I'm back. I don't know.
We were just talking about the Where's Waldo, except where's Michael?
Oh, yeah. Let me show there. I have the.
It's okay.
I have the
That's
poster
technology.
Here. That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
the Where's
Yep.
Yeah,
Waldo.
so here's the poster I'm talking about, and Michael is in there somewhere.
I am.
So
I did not. I
have to
did not
find.
ask to be in there, but I was told later that I am in there. So
Nice.
It is too cool. So
yeah,
that's
it's
that's what
great.
we're giving away to 50 lucky people. So be sure to look down in the description, see if you're eligible, get entered. And yeah, may the odds be ever in your favor. All right. And so what else can we talk about? So
Yeah.
when you hopped off, Michael, I was talking about how the SM7B is, been used in broadcast and podcasting. That's kind of what it's known for. But more and more
Yep.
people are starting to use it on instruments, in the studio, on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a really cool story about this like really little known artist, maybe you've
Yeah.
heard of him, named Mick Jagger. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Michael Jagger, yes, indeed. So, in the Rolling Stones had a mobile studio. They were one of the first to have a mobile truck in the early '70s, and they were endorsers for us. And so we gave them a variety of microphones. I should say we loaned them. I've actually got somewhere in my office here the original signed agreement with the Stones, and it was a loan. It was like, you can keep these until you decide not to use them anymore. Then you got to give them back to us. So,
That's hilarious.
so in '74, we gave them probably about 20 mics to use, and they went to the mobile unit, and one of them was an SM7. And then, they were experimenters, as well as Mick McKenna was the guy who was the mobile studio operator, and Mick liked their products. So they decided, when they were doing some mobile work, I think it was down in the south of France where Bill Wyman lived at the time, to try to mic up Mick with an SM7 and a Neumann, and then listen back and see what the differences were. And interestingly enough, and many times, depending upon what the background mix was, Mick came through better on an SM7 than he did on the Neumann. So this became kind of a standard thing for the Stones to do. They would double mic Mick and then have two tracks of his vocals and then see which one sounded better during the mix down. And many times it was the SM7. I don't have a list of which tracks it was, of course, and you only would find that if you went back and saw the original multi-track. But
Wow.
through Mick McKenna and others, they said, yeah, a lot of times we use the SM7, which makes me think that perhaps that might have been where Quincy Jones got the idea of miking Michael Jackson for Thriller in the early '80s. Don't know that to be true, but high-end recording, it's a small world. They're probably talking about something, maybe Quincy said to whoever mixed, the Rolling Stones producer at the time was, so what are you using for vocals? They said, oh, we've been trying this Shure microphone, and maybe that's where it got. I don't know. But certainly, so that was always kind of a hidden secret. The Thriller use was fairly well known, and that was after Bruce Sweeting came out. But there was another thing that was going on in the '70s, in their late '70s and early '80s, and then Joni Mitchell was on tour at the time, and Joni used the SM7 live on stage for her vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
which was really unusual. I mean, it's a big microphone. It would hide her face, but that's what she wanted to use. So you can find photos of her from that time period on live with a big SM7 on the end of a boom.
Well, I can say as a vocalist that I love using SM7B when I'm tracking or podcasting, but because I can get up close to the microphone itself and not worry as much about plosives or having to use a pop filter. I have had artists that I've tracked who need a pop filter even with the SM7B. But one of the cool things about the mic, and Mario, if you want to pull up the vision or the image of the capsule, hi, words,
sure.
where are they? The reason why it's so cool is because you have so much distance between yourself and the capsule. I guess this doesn't really show, but this is giving you the inner workings of the mic. But, from this windscreen, there is a good, inch and a half, 2 inches before you even get to the capsule. So you have a lot of wiggle room. And it's nice as a singer and as a vocalist to just be able to get really up close and personal with the mic.
Yeah, and that's also why the output's lower too, because it's simply farther back. You can get a lot closer to the SM57 diaphragm than you can to the SM7 diaphragm, and therefore, people say, "Why don't you make it as loud as the SM57?" Well, the diaphragm is set back. Learn your physics, damn it! It's
right.
as simple as that.
Yeah.
Can you go
Mario,
back
wanna
to
go?
that again, Mario?
yeah,
Because
Yeah, yeah.
I want to show a couple things in that.
Sure.
So notice
yeah, please.
the rear acoustical chamber up at the top. So there is an addition. There's additional space behind the diaphragm itself through that rear acoustical chamber, and that actually gives you some of that extended low end. That's one thing that extends the low end. Another thing that extends the low end is the diaphragm is actually more pliable, more flexible, if you will, than it is on a 57 or 58. That helps the low end as well. The shock mount there, that's an air suspension shock mount. That's basically a variation on the A55M rubber donut shock mount that we make as an accessory. And
Mm-hmm.
that rubber donut shock mount was designed by Jerry Plice, which we're going to talk about later. But one of my favorite stories is the front of that. Look at the resonator, which covers the diaphragm up front. You'll notice it kind of looks like it's kind of like jagged around the edges, you know? See a little, how it's like toothed,
Yeah.
right? Well, the reason that is that is an SM57 resonator,
Yep.
like the Gorilla, cut in half.
Oh.
For years, we didn't make a
Wow.
specific resonator for the SM7. We bought SM57 resonators, saw them in half, and that's what went on front of the SM7. Now we don't. Now we make a molded one specifically for the 7. But that gives you an idea about how closely related this is to the SM57. Is that we use the same resonator except the front end sawed off.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
What about when did the switches get introduced to the back, Michael?
Right at the beginning. Right at the beginning. We that was always there. We had a series, still do. We have a series called the A15 series. These are inline adapters that you can plug in and do various things. And one of the A15s was a high pass filter. So it would roll off the low ends. And the other one was called a presence adapter. It would give you a little peak around 2K up to 5K. And these already existed. They were about yay long and XLR connectors on them and so forth. So someone came up with the idea, well, we got those. Why don't we just put those same circuits into the back of the SM7? We got the room and put a couple switches in there to switch them on and off. So they came from the A15 series. We just put them inside the SM7 and added on-off switches on the back. So they were there from the beginning.
And you mentioned
Very cool.
Jerry Plice.
Yep. Jerry Plice, amazing guy. He was here when funny guy. Oh my God, the jokes this guy was funny all the time. But he was had a full workshop at his house. He would bring in with what we call Plice's devices. These are things that he would make. He would make at home. Primarily a microphone engineer, micro development engineer, and working on the innards of the microphones. Did develop the A55M, the rubber donut shock mount. That was his patent as well. So primarily, he was an inside guy, but for some reason, he took a crack at doing the industrial design of the SM7. Industrial design means what it looks like, not how it works, but what it looks like. And Jerry did the industrial design of that SM7. He had no training in this whatsoever, but yet he came up with those sketches. This is the patent for the industrial design in 1974. And he his what we call it, beginner's luck, maybe. Well, he wasn't a beginner, but he was a beginner as far as industrial design was. And he made a product that somehow looks like it never ages.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
right? I mean, 1973 it comes out. It's 2023 now. It still looks modern. How do you do that? I don't know. But Jerry, this is one of Jerry's patents. It just happens to be. I think it's his only design patent. I think everything else was utility patents. How they work. But yeah, amazing. He was great. I remember starting here, and I was 23 years old, and I was at a party, and Jerry was 50 years old. Can you imagine anybody being that old? And I remember I just imagine.
Yes,
I remember him fitting. He everybody loved him. He related to people older than him, younger than him, and I remember saying, when I'm 50 years old, I want to be cool like Jerry Plice, And so he was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did he create or design? You said that he had utility patents.
Yes.
So other things that maybe we would be familiar with that he had a hand in or was it
SM,
just random?
SM11, little
Mm.
dynamic moving coil lavalier microphone was one of the things.
Mm.
He did a underwater microphone for divers,
Mm.
mask diver. That was pretty cool. Um, he was just one of those guys. He was a tinkerer, right? And he could just many of our greatest products have been invented by people, and pretty much to date they've been men, but now that's starting to change, thank goodness. They're tinkerers. They
Mm.
like to mess around with stuff. You cannot go to college and come out with a degree in microphone engineering. They don't exist. You got to get mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, or you're just a tinkerer, and then you come to a microphone company and you learn on the job from everyone else.
Uh,
So yeah, he was. Everybody loved Jerry.
yeah, tinkerers. We have a lot of those
Yeah,
still.
We
right.
do.
Sure, a lot of
Yeah,
great tinkerers who are
yeah, indeed.
Tinkerers
tinker.
and musicians. So many
Yes.
musicians at Shure.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
many. Michael is one of them. Actually, all three of
Indeed.
us are musicians, which is another cool part of our culture at Shure, which I just love.
Yep.
And any given day, you can collaborate not only on whatever you're working on for work, but you can find a new artist to check out or listen to new things. So that's just
We got
another
we
unique
Yeah.
thing about
Right.
yeah,
working
we got
for Shure.
we
Yeah.
got a we got a cool studio
fun.
here in Niles that we
Yeah.
can use for rehearsals at lunch and so forth. It's great.
Yeah, and a theater.
Yeah, we do.
That's amazing
Yep.
too.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have a thing called Eat to the Beat, right? Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
at lunchtime
That happened
at
yesterday.
HQ?
Yeah.
That's the
Supposed to be
HQ.
outside, but they had to move
Yep.
it indoors because it was. And we had back in May, we had our first for many years our Shure Unplugged concert, which was all acoustic.
Oh.
No, not a microphone in sight except for recording.
That's awesome.
Wow.
I get jealous of you
Yeah.
guys in HQ.
I know.
We don't get to
I'm
do
in
that stuff.
Connecticut. Mario's in San Diego area. Like we're just over here. Like, oh, that looks really fun.
But
But
it's-
there's still
it's-
ways of being
Yeah,
For the-
it's
feeling
awesome.
included.
Right.
For the first time ever, we did a couple songs by Stephen Sondheim. Sondheim had never been performed here. And Cheryl and I did it. I worked out some arrangements of Sondheim on guitar. The hardest thing I've ever done. He does not translate the
Oh.
guitar well.
No, forget
Not at all.
about it.
It took me
Oh,
a
wow.
couple of months to do it. But I digress.
Cheryl
Let's
is
get back
one
to
of
the
our-
SM7. Oh,
No,
amazing
but
stuff.
Cheryl is
Yeah.
one of our other colleagues, Cheryl Jennison DeProsa, and she's phenomenally talented and also hosts a great deal of our webinars,
Yeah.
if not all
Right.
of them.
Mhm.
So, if you're ever on Shure.com, if you want to look, I should say that and give a little plug. We have a bunch of different educational resources available at Shure, specifically the Shure Audio Institute. So you can go to Shure.com and find it under support, where you can take courses on all of these microphones. You can learn about the SM7B and the 57 and 58 and the history. And then there's also a wealth of support knowledge there if you're looking for some frequently asked questions. And then there's all of the amazing support tools if you're in the wireless realm, our wireless frequency, frequency finder, our spectrum. You can get all of the accessories spec'd out when you're buying a wireless system. So there's tons on there, in addition to going there and finding out about the products that you all know and love. If you're looking to go a little bit deeper, check out the Shure Audio Institute because
Yeah.
there's a
yeah,
ton
Laura,
a ton
I just
there.
said this,
And
this-
watch
this-
some webinars while you're there too. They're in the same spot.
And this all goes back to Mr. Schure's philosophy. Mr. Shure always believed that if you educated customers honestly, they would be loyal to you. And we still do that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Education. Education.
Yeah. And we also have the Louder publication too, which has a lot of great content with folks that we work with and stuff. Like we have the Signal Path podcast and with some really interesting artists and key figures in the industry. So something else to check out too. It's a great publication.
And I guess we should say Shure is based in Chicago, in Niles, specifically the headquarters. We didn't really mention that. We just kind of assumed everybody knew that, but that's what we're talking about when we say headquarters.
Right.
Yeah. So we're talking about folks who use the SM7B, and I have a picture of someone who is a staple of my childhood. who, when you shared the picture with me, I was like, oh, cool, we got to share this on the live stream.
Okay.
And that is Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman.
So growing up in the 70s, there was a lot of Wolfman Jack. A lot of Wolfman Jack. So, and surprised to see him using the SM7. So I was extremely happy and excited when I saw this picture, and definitely wanted to share here on this stream as well.
Did you notice he worked at WNBC in New York and KABC in Los Angeles, and he would travel back and forth, and he would carry his SM7 with it. But also notice Wolfman is actually very good. He's got that. If you see that microphone is actually off to the side, pointed at the corner of his mouth, so he didn't have so he didn't have plosives.
Right.
He knew.
Oh yeah.
Don't talk into the microphone. Talk across the microphone.
Yeah, and he was. Oh yeah. It was loud too. So
yes,
he was also very loud. So he was in
dynamic,
danger.
Yes,
he was in danger of plosives. So, but yeah, I was like super happy to see this picture because it reminded me a lot of what it was like growing up in the 70s as a kid.
Memories. Yeah. There's lots of different people who have stories about that, and it's fascinating to hear Michael's perspective too, because you have a lot of knowledge based on just being here, but also managing the archive with Julie Snyder, and seeing what comes in from all over the world.
Do you guys remember? Do you remember how the SM7 was on national television every night? Not every once a night during the early '90s. Do you remember that? No, you don't. Do you remember a show called Northern Exposure?
Oh yeah, Northern Exposure.
Oh
Do you remember the DJ?
Yeah.
He had
of course,
an SM7 without the windscreen on for some reason. We don't know why. And that show ran for 5 years, and every time they showed them, there was an SM7 on screen. We could have never paid for that advertising, and that was there. And that was, it was just like, I think they took the windscreen off just to make it look more rugged, outdoorsy. I don't know why, but that was really the first television exposure. Except for, I was looking recently. I was trying to find out where the first SM7 on TV I could find out, and I found a clip from 1974 where it was being used on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but not as Carson's on-air mic, as a microphone on Doc Severson's stand to mic his trumpet.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's the earliest television exposure I've found, and that would have been a year after it came out, so it was pretty quick.
Wow.
But,
And
Northern
then
exposure.
The transition between the SM7 and the SM7B.
How about the A? How about the A? You gotta
exactly.
Yeah, so the A came out in 1999.
Yeah, talk about that.
And there was a very specific reason we did that. For years on radio stations, the copy was on paper, and the on-air person would have paper copy in front of them, and they would read the copy, and that was all good, well and good. But then they decided to start using basically computer monitors, cathode ray tubes, to have the copy. And of course, it was very close to the SM7 or whatever the voiceover microphone. And it turned out that the cathode ray tube monitors had a hum field. And when you would put it too close to the microphone, you would hear in the background this little hum. And so, the microphone had been there for a while. And of course, what gets blamed? The microphone always gets blamed, right?
Always.
We couldn't say, hey, CRT monitors, why don't you shield your monitors better? No, you got to blame the microphones, right? So we came up with a much better humbucking coil to put in the SM7A, so it can be used closer to CRT monitors and not hum. So that was the A version. And then it was only 3 years later that the B version came out, which was simply doing nothing but adding the larger foam windscreen, which looked like the SM5.
Yep.
So and that's where we are at. That's where we are at today.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So if anyone's on the stream and has any questions, now's your last chance to throw them in there to see if you can stump Michael. No, to see what other knowledge.
I love that. Stump me. I like.
Yeah, if you had any like really pressing questions about Now's the time.
So is
Yeah,
around
we've got
2000.
James Hicks telling.
James.
Yep.
I was just going to
Good
say,
question.
James Hicks is here saying he's coming to HQ for a tour. We got Yuri saying he wants an SM5 for his collection, and Banner Scott was very happy to learn about the SM57 resonator, which he and I both did not know. So I learned that today.
Yeah, me too.
So the SM5s, if you SM5s are available online, they're really expensive. You expect to pay $1,000 and up for them, by the way, because they're just so rare. But I was just
Oh
saying
boy, Yuri,
yeah,
start
but with
saving
the
now.
but the SM7B, it was around 2007, 2008 that podcasting got a hold of it, and it'd be very interesting for me to find out, and I haven't been to figure out, who was one of the first influential podcasters to start using it. Why I think they use it. It sounds great. That's a no-brainer. But it was then that the sales started to climb up, and then around 2015 or so, video gamers started to add them onto their list as well. So it's
Streamers,
amazing.
yeah.
It's
50. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's amazing how many folks have used that microphone or this microphone for all their content. You mentioned gamers. We were at TwitchCon last year, which is the big convention for Twitch, and we were surprised at how many folks resonated with that mic. They knew it, they saw it. Young kids, young folks,
It's very
or younger
recognizable.
folks. Yeah, very recognizable. Same thing. We were at another convention called VidCon, and VidCon is specifically for the YouTube influencer and the YouTube, and a lot of young folks attend that show. Kids is a large audience demographic for that, and they were familiar with. They're like, oh yeah, that's that mic I saw so and so use, or that's the mic. So it was an eye opener to see how much this microphone resonated with so many people at such a range of different ages and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, right? It's 50 years old. It's selling better than it ever has. It's completely the antithesis of what most modern things are. Oh, your phone is 2 years old. You better throw that out and get another one,
Right.
and now we've got a microphone that basically has had a continual, almost a straight line as far as sales from 1973 to 2023. What a weird thing that is, right? And it's a technology piece, but yet it just reminds me of maybe the Fender Telecaster or Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Well, and there's something to be said for the mic as well, which we didn't really touch on, but the reason why a lot of podcasters and streamers and gamers are using the mic is because they're doing it from home. Like you mentioned, that wasn't a thing when the mic came out, and it's so good at blocking sounds coming into the mic outside of the one right in front of it. And that's why it's so great, because if you're living in an untreated space like the one we're all sitting in right now, you can hear Mario and I are nice and close on our dynamic mics, and Michael's using our MV5, which is great for conferencing, but you can hear a little bit more of his room. So if you're looking for something that's going to block out the reflections and noise in your space, then get yourself a dynamic mic. Which reminds me, I was going to show kind of the cousin of the SM7B. This is our MV7, which is a USB XLR hybrid mic. This is my custom version of it. But you can see it's got, I'm going to go the wrong way here. There we go. XLR and USB and a headphone out on the back. So if you're wanting to use it on your streams and for podcasting, it's just a great option. So same idea of blocking out the sound using voice isolation technology, but just a different mic that's a nod to the SM7B for those of those modern kids out there.
Yeah, and you can use the analog XLR out at the same time you're using the USB out, which is a great little feature.
Yeah. I think the thing about the MV7 that's so great is that anybody can use it. Your level of audio doesn't need to be engineer level. You can literally get an MV7, plug it into your laptop, and download the app, and you're ready to go. The app is like acting as your own audio engineer. So for those who don't know a lot about audio and you're getting kind of roadblocked with getting great audio for whatever content you're doing, that's what's great about the MV7 is it's dynamic. It kind of does the same thing that the SM7B does, where you don't need that treated room, but it's super easy to use. I recommend it all the time. I'm fanboying over the MV7 because it's such a great mic.
It speaks to answers one of the questions in the chat that came in from Bandrew. He's saying, am I mistaken that your microphones are made to military specifications? And so even our USB microphones and the SM7B, Michael, you want to speak to that?
Yep, okay. So the whole mil-spec thing started back during World War II, where we were conscripted by the government basically to make microphones for the Allied forces and headphones for the Allied forces. So to do that, you got to make the products to a much higher quality standard because, if a microphone stops working at home, you might be annoyed. If it stops working on the battlefield, you might lose a soldier or a platoon or whatever you might. So we started using military spec during World War II. And Mr. Shure, who was running the company at the time, when the war ends, he said, something about this mil spec? It costs us more money up front and so forth. But at the back end, the products last longer. We have fewer returns. What if we made our consumer products to military spec? And so he made that decision literally in 1945, and we continue that today.
Wow.
I mean, if you would see the torture that we put our products through, environmental tortures, drop test tortures. Everybody comes through the tour, they go, wow, I never thought there would be so much into making microphones. Well, it's to make the stuff, the mil spec, you have to do that. What's the name of the company? It's his family name.
Right.
It's not Universal Microphones. It's not International Microphones. It's Shure.
Yeah.
And so he was very adamant that the product live up to his family name. He never wanted to be embarrassed about that. So that's why we still use mil spec today. And it's also why the products, I bought my first SM7, I think in 1975. I still have it. It works just fine. I've replaced the foam. I've replaced the foam once, but isn't that true sustainability? Buy it once and never have to buy it again.
Yeah, endless 58s that you see out in the wild that have been out there for a long time. And, it's not just microphones, too. You're wearing, I believe those are 1840s. Yes. And that's a aluminum alloy yoke that we're using, aircraft grade, right? So even in headphones, in everything, you've got that quality, and it goes back to
Yeah, he didn't believe in, make the product last for 5 years and that's good enough. That just was not what he wanted to do, And I think whatever you think of our company, I think you can always find people say durable, reliable. Those are
even more than you learned today. And you can also enter to win one of those 50 limited edition mics if you are in the right part of the world. Again, don't shoot the messenger. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. We had such a blast. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next month. We'll be doing this every month. So be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube Shure Creators channel. And we see you next time, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.